welcome. And I come to you today from Termonini Parish Church, and it's great to be able to speak to you today from here. Today we celebrate the 72nd anniversary of the founding of the National Health Service, a great jewel in the British or the UK crown, and certainly something that we've come to appreciate even more, and the dedication of those who work in it even more. Although they have faced great trials, they've overcome great obstacles, and regretfully some of them have had to pay the ultimate price in terms of their health and their lives. So I just want to say a great big thank you to anybody who's been involved, particularly in the NHS, our nurses, our doctors, all the backups services that are involved with that. And of course I would likewise, and I'll give me the liberty of including all those involved in caring occupations. That's a great inspiration to the rest of us, and I think we've been revaluing what is important as opposed to what's paid well. And I hope that's a conversation that we keep talking about in the months and years ahead. But today, I want to talk to you about St. Peter. This is what's known in the time of year in the Anglican Church as Peter Tide, or St. Peter's Tide. It's when we remember St. Peter, and it refers to usually the Sunday closest to the 29th of June. Now, of course, that was a Wednesday, so I'm taking it for this Sunday. And this time is particularly important within clerical circles because it's the time, one of the two times of the year when deacons and priests are ordained to their vocation. And the other one being a season known as Michaelmas, which is actually around the 29th of September. If you look at a Church of England prayer book or even the back of the old prayer book, you'll find these seasons mentioned, though we tend not to use them these days. And in fact, it was just over 11 years ago that I was ordained deacon myself. So we've been on a little bit of a journey. You know, I like St. Peter because St. Peter was a very real person full of character flaws, and he's a guy who made mistakes. He reminds me a bit of me and a bit like a lot of other people that I have met. Do you remember the mistake he made in the Garden of Gethsemane? Well, he got crossed for starters, and then he cut off somebody's ear. And then within days, in defending Jesus, and within days he denied even knowing Jesus. You remember that cock crowing moment. But yet, despite all the character flaws, he would be the rock on which the church would be built. He had a very bumpy but highly significant journey, highly significant walk with Jesus. But today I want to invite you to join me on a walk, and I invite you to go on a walk. And the Bible is, amongst other things, full of unforgettable walks. Remember, there was that walk taken by God himself, who we were told used to walk in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. But as a general rule, God asked people to walk with him. Do you remember that hard walk that Abraham took with his son Isaac on the road to Moriah? And then when he was been challenged to sacrifice his own son? Do you remember the liberating walk that Moses and the Israelites took on the path that was normally occupied by the Red Sea, and followed by the frustrating walk that took them on a very roundabout route through the desert, the wilderness, for 40 years? And of course there's that dramatic walk, Joshua's dramatic walk round Jericho, when he walked round the walls, and on the seventh time the walls came tumbling down. And on a more subtle basis, that walk with the disciples on the road to Emmaus, as the slow dawning of the presence of Jesus came upon them. And then, of course, there was that most dramatic of walks that Paul had, that it was interrupted as he was on his walk to Damascus. You see, there was the walk also that we must remember that was so sad and so holy that it was given its own name. The walk from the Praetorium to Golgotha in Jerusalem, the walk that we now know as the Via Dolorosa, or the Way of Great Sorrow. But perhaps one of the most unforgettable walks, and the one I want to refer to today, as has been referenced in our Gospel passage for today, was the walk that was taken by Peter the day he got out of the boat and walked on water. It is unforgettable not so much because of where he was walking, as what he was walking on and who he was walking with. I think that when Peter was treading on the waves, he was experiencing walking at its finest. Now, some of you will be aware of John Ortberg's book, If You Want to Walk on Water, You've Got to Get Out of the Boat. However, there's one fundamental problem with boats. Our boats tend to be very comfortable places to be. They're very non-threatening. They're comfort zones. And heating engineers will tell you the comfort zone's in around 20 degrees centigrade, and that's a temperature at which we tend to just get very cosy and sit on our settees and not be very interactive. So we can be quite passive in the comfort zone. So the comfort zone can very easily be a place where very little happens, or certainly very little new happens. But in Ortberg's book, Peter's walk stands as an invitation to everyone who, like him, wants to step out in a walk on faith, or feel they're being called to step out in a walk on faith, who wants to experience something more of the power and the presence of God in their lives. So let water walking be a picture of doing, with God's help, what we could never do on our own. So how do such things come about? Well, there's a consistent pattern that we see in Scripture again and again of what happens in the life that God wants to use and improve, who wants to call them to walk with him. Firstly, there's always a call. God asks an ordinary person, dare I say it, just like you, just like me, to engage in an act of extraordinary trust, that of getting out of your boat. And then secondly, there's always fear. God has an inextinguishable habit of asking people to do things that terrify them. It's not just you feels like that. We've all felt like that. In the Bible, all the heroes felt like that. Because, and why might there be fear? Well, there may be a sense of inadequacy. I'm not good enough because. And even Moses himself, that great leader of the Israelites, the children of Israel, who apparently had a very severe speech impediment, but yet he was an orator. And Moses said, I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. He felt inadequate. He couldn't talk like an orator. But it also may be the fear of failure. The land that we explored devours those who live in it, cried the spies sent out into the promised land. They were scared of what lay ahead. There may even be a fear of God himself. And we hear it in the parable of the talents, the comment of one of the servants. For I knew you were a hard man, seeking to reap where you did not sow. Fear. But in one way or another, there will be fear. But there will also likewise be reassurance when you're called to walk on water. God promises his presence. He said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. That's what the angel assured Gideon, who had certainly been never addressed by that title before. Remember, God always chooses the little people, the insignificant ones. Remember the youngest shepherd boy of a family of big, strong, strapping lads. That would become King David. But God also promises to give whatever gifts, skills, or attributes are needed to fulfill the call on the life that he has given you. The stuttering Moses said, the Lord tells the stuttering Moses, I will help you speak and teach you what to say. You see, we don't end up working in our own strength. We work in the strength that the Lord gives us. And in this walk on water, there will always be a decision. You will always be able to give them the choice to decide. Sometimes, as with Moses and Gideon, people say yes to God's call in their lives. Sometimes, as with the 10 frightened spies or the rich young ruler who spoke with Jesus, the answer is no. But everyone has to decide for themselves. You have to decide for yourself. And then there is always a changed life. Those who say yes to God's call don't walk the walk perfectly. No, not by a long shot. But because they said yes to God, they learn and grow even from their failures. I'm reminded of the story of Edison, who has given the credit of inventing the light bulb. But metaphorically speaking, he invented the light bulb on the 100th attempt. So he had 99 failures. Did that make him a failure? No, it just prepared him to improve his technique until he got it right, because he was a success. The road to success is paved with what some call failure, others call development. They all become part, all these actions become part of how God chooses to redeem the world. And as I said, there's a choice. People don't always say yes, some say no, and they're changed as well. And when they say no, when somebody says no, they become just a little bit harder, a little bit more resistant to God's calling, a little bit more likely to say no the next time, and say no the next time, and say no the next time. Whatever the decision you make, it will always change your life. And it will change the world that your life touches. And I believe we see this pattern in the scriptures today. And I believe there's some aspect of your life in which God is calling you to walk with Him and to Him. And when they say yes to His calling. It sets in motion a divine dynamic far beyond the scope of mere human power. It's divine movement. The Spirit is moving. Maybe this calling has to do with something to do with your work. Maybe you have to take a risk in a relationship, or an opportunity to develop a gift, or maybe an opportunity to use the resources you could give to God. But I can almost guarantee to you that in answering yes to walking on water, it will almost certainly involve you facing your deepest fear, your deepest insecurity. Certainly, it will go to the core of who you are and what you do. Yet, if you can overcome your fear, God will guide you and empower you to learn the skills essential to enable you to become a water walker. Enabling you to discern God's call on your life, giving you the courage to risk acting in faith, managing the failure you will encounter on your way, because there will be things that won't go right, but they will prepare you for the ultimate challenge in the future. It's not failure, it's training. That's what they call it in business. You have to be educated in the way. None of us knew how to do anything until we learned how to do it, did we? And this is what it's like when you live a life trusting in God. Today we know all too well that in these days we live in times of great fear and uncertainty. We're seeing the lockdown being gradually loosened. And this is a good thing. But it also has negative aspects if we're not very careful. We have to double up on our sense of giving people their social space. We have to remind ourselves to keep washing our hands. The fear may have gone that motivated us before, but we have to move into continuing to focus on what will keep us, and just as importantly, our neighbour healthy. So as you go about in your unlocked or less locked life, please do keep that in mind. Please. So, as I bring my thoughts to a conclusion, I invite you, no matter how scary, no matter how ill-equipped you may feel, to say yes to God's prompting, whatever it may be in your life. And it can make no sense sometimes. And as I know all too well myself, sometimes circumstances force you down a certain route. A bit like Paul on his missionary journeys. When he tried to go one way, it was blocked and he had to go another. God works that way. But he uses circumstances for his will, not to stifle them. So, for you, those of you who are not yet convinced about this walking on water business, just remember one thing. If you do stay in your boat, if you do stay in your comfort zone, if you do keep saying no, you will eventually die in your boat. And you'll end up wondering, have that little question in your mind, I wonder what would have happened if. What would have happened if I'd said yes? How might my life have been different if I'd only been willing to get out of my boat? Friends, I invite you to go for a walk. I invite you to walk on water. But remember, if you want to walk on water, you have to get out of your boat. Now I'm just going to invite you to listen to a piece of music. There's a link below this video clip, and I invite you to listen to the words of a Garth Brooks song. Those in my parish have heard this before, but it's important. It's Garth Brooks' song, Standing Outside the Fire, and it sums up that dilemma of, do I stay in my boat and be comfortable and ignore the challenge, or do I accept the challenge and go and risk walking on water, or in this instance he uses the analogy of walking into the fire. And it's all summed up by the phrase, life is not tried, it is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire. I would suggest life is not tried, it is merely survived if you don't get out of your boat. God bless you.